Didn't see you, sorry. Morning, Mike. Morning, everybody. Morning. This is Talking Niagara this morning. And welcome to your number one local talk show on news and events that impact Niagara. We're live every weekday morning, 7 a.m., just as we are now. Well, yeah. Okay. There's lots of items of news this morning, Dave. I'm hoping we can get through them all. So far, keep it brief, because I don't think any of these are worth deep analysis, but they're all interesting.
Right? Okay, fire away.
Yeah. So where? Oh yeah. This first one we didn't have yesterday. About this rifle that this gentleman found. That's a fascinating story about what happened. He's found a rifle. He was looking at
musket, not a rifle.
Musket, sorry, a musket. Thank you for correcting me. There's long been folklore around the area that the British East India Company supplied rifles for the use of for the war of 1812, and the trouble is it's not been substantiated by actual rifles. Now, a local resident, Brian Rollison, was clicking through an auction site on old material, on old weapons, and he spotted a War of 1812 musket that he thought could be an important find in the story of Upper Canada, and the item did not get sold at auction, and he investigated it further. And it was a Windus pattern 1771 flintlock musket dated 1799, made in England by gunmaker Henshaw for the East India Company. And so they've never been able to confirm that East India Company supplied Canadian troops, but now they have.
Yes, there's been evidence, but not anything really substantial to suggest that the British government, being so tapped out by the war in the Napoleonic Wars, it couldn't supply as much muskets as it needed, and including to supply the muskets required by the Canadian militia during the War of 1812. Well, this guy's been able to zero in on this. Not only that, but he was able to identify the militiamen that were using it.
Yeah.
And
that's
a bunch
important.
of other.
Yeah. That's very important.
Yeah, it's important because usually when you hear the story of Canada, you hear a lot about the British Army, and you hear Canadian militia added onto it. But according to this article, it really shows the Canadian militia played much bigger part in the war than we otherwise thought.
Yeah.
Now we do hear about like the Black Troops militia that was formed, because that's interesting. Yeah. We hear about the Indigenous soldiers, but in this particular case, it really shows the situation, what was happening. The British were really on their back heel with the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
And so forth. And they had to then acquire firearms from other places. And one of the places was the East India Company. And just to remind everybody, the East India Company was only moderately attached to the British government at the time. The East India Company had its own army and its own.
It was a private army. A private army that used to control, private army and navy that controlled India and trade to India, and also started exploring beyond just the realms of India. Soon after, in the 1800s, by the 1800s, was actually controlling much of the British trade to Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah, the British pretty much copied the model that the Dutch had started, which was the Dutch East India Company. and which was very successful. It was an act of genius by the Dutch, and the British followed along. Not only did they follow along, but they also used Dutch designs in their ships, et cetera, et cetera. So aside from that, though, the Dutch East India Company were procuring firearms, but the British government didn't have enough of its own. So when it came time to supply the militias in Canada, it used these East India Company muskets that were.
The interesting thing is that they're saying this was used by Private George Grass of the 1st Lincoln Militia, 2nd Flank Company, and they were stationed in Niagara on the Lake as part of the 4th Division D during the war, and they were commanded by Captain John McEwen. And what happened is that this was one of a battle. He was battled in the Battle of Fort George in May 27th, 1813, where George Grass died, and where this musket was found on the US side probably indicates that it was taken as a taken as by an American on the battlefield as kind of as the things that they do when they've completed the battle, right? Because I believe that's the battle that was won by the Americans, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the one where the munitions depot, the magazine was blown up right where the British were breaching the walls. Yeah, and it killed a whole pile of British. If that hadn't happened, the battle would have turned the other way. It was an accident that defeated the British at that particular battle because so many of the men died where they breached the walls and the magazine blew up. Right, exactly, pretty much close to that particular point and place.
And these were, and this is kind of the kind of war materials that many soldiers take home, and it was taken home to Niagara Falls, New York, by an American and kept by an American family, and that was who they obtained this weapon from. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it could even be a Canadian family that moved to the United States afterwards. Who knows?
Yeah,
but it was a prize of war. Basically, what happened in these after a battle, whoever dominated the battle got all the stuff. We know that after the Battle of Lundy's Lane, the Americans had to retreat. When the second day of battle was about to ensue, the Americans withdrew because they knew they couldn't handle another day like that. But in the meantime, they left a lot of their munitions behind.
Yeah.
So the British were able to acquire all but one of their cannons, all of one of the American cannons, and probably because the battlefield was just laid waste, the Americans had to leave it quickly.
Yeah.
So the British Army would have taken every musket, all the
especially all the muskets fire.
Yes, they would have taken all their war materials, et cetera, et cetera. And we do know that there were so many bodies they could not bury them, and they put them in a big. They burned as many as they could, and that would probably be almost all the Americans. And they may have taken time to bury some of the Canadian guys, but most of the bodies were just burned in a big fire because they had too many of them.
Yeah, that's
how terrible that was right here in Lundy's Lane. And so that was typical.
Well, this gentleman was
somebody probably this fella died in the battle and Fort George, and what appears to be the Americans, like in every different soldier would scavenge the battlefield and take home. Imagine somebody took it to take home to use thereafter, because people still did a whole lot of hunting, and a really good musket like that would be pretty valuable.
Oh yeah.
So it could be just spoils of war.
Yeah, spoils of war is, there's a lot of weapons collected on battlefields all over the world, of course, right? By the victors or by the survivors. Not necessarily victors, but often survivors. Because even if you retreat and you retreat past an enemy soldier, a dead enemy soldier who's got a weapon on their back, you might take it.
Yeah. So it also mentions that the family, and this particular Grass's family, a couple of his brothers were killed in different battles too. So it gives you an idea that the militias were an important part of the fighting. So George Grass' two brothers fought at the Battle of Lundy's Lane and survived, and two other ones survived the war. But it even goes right down to right down to the Battle of New Orleans, where one of them, it seems to me, I have been a couple of days since I've read the article. Anyway, it's just a very interesting, very interesting part of the history of the area. Yeah.
And to have found it,
if anyone in history not wants to read a good article, this is a good article.
Yeah.
And we have to really nod our hats to Rawlinson, who was the guy that bought this. Rawlinson, who was the guy that bought this, and he laid out $8,000 for it, but he wanted to make sure it was the kind of
so he did a lot of research. Yeah. And that research is absolutely huge, because now it's got a whole history of that particular rifle.
Yeah, there's a million reasons why it was a better weapon overall. It was a very good weapon that the East India Company had. Of course, we are familiar with the Brown Bess, and Brown Bess, which is used for probably almost over 150 years, I think, by the British Army. Took them everywhere around the world. So it was a very effective a musket. But the other one, of course, was the Baker rifle, which was a fairly short barreled rifle that the British used here. It was perfectly good for the bushy area that we have here. So the long Kentucky rifle that we hear about from the United States, which was actually from Tennessee, made by Germans, was a really superior rifle, but it had its real limitations in the close in wilderness fighting, because it got in the way a lot. So the shorter barrel Baker rifle was what the British used. It was very effective up here.
Yeah. Okay. So that's something added to now Niagara history. Yeah, because of the War of 1812 and the history, and folklore does have a part in actually creating history.
Yeah, it says his family history is also tied to the War of 1812. His great-great-great-grandfather fought in the war against Americans with the 95th Rifles, 3rd Battalion, and was shot through the neck at the Battle of New Orleans on January 8, 1815. Yes, that tragic battle, the needless battle, because even if the British had won it, they'd have to turn everything back over to the Americans, and the Americans won a battle that didn't mean anything, but it was a great boost to their folklore. Even though the battle happened after the war had come to an end.
Yeah. Okay. But again, back in those days, of course, communications wouldn't allow a war to end, because it would take days to get the communications from the point of ceasefire to the battle fronts in all the locations, right?
Yeah. Wellington wanted that war wrapped up as fast as possible, even though the tide had turned and the British were becoming to predominate, and they were because even though the War of 18 or the Napoleonic Wars had come to a conclusion when Napoleon was put into Elba, they were flaring up again, and Wellington saw that there could be sustained war on the continent, and he wanted that war to be tied up quickly so that the resources could be reassigned to the British most immediate needs.
Yeah.
So so
Wellington was a brilliant general, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was, and he was up against the best general of all time, Napoleon. And when they won the British won the battle, when Brugger, I think it's Brugger, was at first defeated, but then returned to the field of battle. That was the turning point. At that point, the British had they didn't have any more ammunition left, and it looked as if Napoleon had won or was about to win, and Brugger stepped onto the field. So it wasn't Wellington himself. He said it was the closest run thing of all time. When Wellington was asked who is the best general of all, he says Napoleon, hands down.
Yes, I know, but we were talking British generals there, not everybody. Yeah, and probably Napoleon's still regarded as one of the greatest war tacticians of all time as well.
Yeah, he's right up there with Alexander, kind of, and Hannibal.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, moving on. NASA's going back to the moon. Not to actually land on the moon, but to map the moon, go around the moon, see more about the moon, learn more about the moon.
Yeah, they're going to look at parts of the moon that nobody has ever seen before.
Yeah, particularly the dark side of the side we don't see, because the moon, we see one side and one side only.
That's right.
It wobbles to us. You know, we basically see one side that slightly moves, but we never see the backside of the moon.
No, we don't. It's very curious that just about every other satellite will have its own rotation. The moon, being an unusually large satellite, particularly for a planet the size of the Earth, it's very big comparatively. It's a real anomaly out there for a planet the size of Earth to have such a huge moon is irregular, and the fact that the moon itself does not rotate, and the same face of the moon is
well, it rotates, but it rotates in a perfect 24-hour cycle.
Well, the moon itself doesn't spin on an axis; it stays static, and it goes around the Earth. Now, of course, we call it the dark side of the moon because we don't see it. Because when we see the moon, we only see the bright side that we can see. But of course, when the moon goes around the Earth, the backside of it is lit up by the sun, but we just can't see it.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's where the astronauts will go when it has a lot of light on it, from being in that particular point where the backside of it is actually facing the sun to us, and we'll see, and they'll map that up. And I don't know, it's kind of one of those good news stories at a time when there's just so much BS on Earth. When we talk about technology and going off and discovering the moon, and this is going to give information for them that might help them get to Mars one day. And it kind of diverts away from the madness that's going on Earth today. And that's the whole dichotomy of human civilization. You can attain wonderful and huge and beautiful things, but at the base of society, we're always at risk of the barbarity of our ancestors. We still go to war. We still kill each other in war. We still have ideas that are barbaric in our own eyes, but were accepted years and years ago by empires and all that.
Yeah.
We know it's all wrong and we know it's all stupid, but we can't seem to stop doing it.
Yeah.
But when we hear something like this is sort of
Good
sort
news
of
story.
swells the soul a bit. Yeah, okay,
Well,
we're still on track to do
let's
some great
celebrate.
things.
Let's celebrate mission specialist Jeremy Hansen, who's the Canadian on the trip.
Yeah, that's right. He's he's up there, and his responsibility is to instruct the other moon the other astronauts on how to fill their idle hours on the long journey by playing space hockey. Yeah, so yeah, there's a Canadian guy there. It's international. That's good. So I don't know. It's just a good news story, and it'd be very interesting. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of films and videos and things like that. So all the space nerds out there, and there's lots of us. Well, I'm not particularly a space nerd, but I am definitely a nerd for that kind of thing, science and exploration and all that.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the good things about this is that, they're doing a series of missions in order, as you said, to help them understand and get moving towards Mars. But they're also, that will give them a greater understanding of what the moon is and what, of the moon, right? Which is a good thing.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So there you have it.
Yeah. Yesterday, unfortunately, there was a big accident across the Garden City Skyway, and it goes to prove that these things can happen despite the best we can do to protect people. And essentially, a wheel came off of a truck,
Pickup truck.
and ended up flying, pickup truck, and ended up flying across the highway and killing somebody.
Yeah, am I reading this right? Where it was an American that was driving the truck, and his wheel got let go, and it actually ended up killing an American going the other way. Is that how it was?
That's what I read. Yep, it's unfortunate. Yeah, and well, actually, no, it's a Canadian. It's a Canadian who lives in the US. Right?
Oh, a Canadian that lives in the US.
Yeah.
Who's okay, and he's the guy that died.
He's the guy that died. Yeah.
What a bit of irony that is. That's pretty strange coincidence.
That is very strange.
An American vehicle, kind of causing another American vehicle to, I mean, what are the odds?
Of all the vehicles that are on the highway at that moment, what are the odds? Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's a tragic thing. The guy was charged, was he not?
I believe so. Yeah, and unfortunate. It's also, it says to us, let's keep our vehicles safe, and let's keep yourself safe. That's one of those instances where, if you'd have been driving there, there's absolutely nothing you can do if that tire comes at you. All you can do is pray.
Yeah. So the basically, if you're doing your own work on your cars, if you're putting your own tires back on, like many of us have done, in poorer times. I know I've done a bunch of that, changed out tires and fixed flats, et cetera, et cetera. You have to be very careful of how you snug up your lug nuts. A lot of people think that they just heave it as much. There's a torque setting. And if you don't know that torque setting, just snug them up.
Well, I used to have a torque wrench, for a torque tire wrench that would give you the torque values. So when you tightened it up, you'd then pull it, and it would show you what the torque factor was.
Yes. So if you don't have that, and most of us didn't, you'd bring them up snug. You wouldn't killer tighten them.
Yeah.
If you do that, you put strain on your studs and they'll let go because they're tightened up too much. So the stud can only take so much torque as you know, the diameter of the stud is only so much. So if you think you're going to make it better by tightening it as hard as you can, that's wrong, because what you will do is put too much strain on those studs, and they could snap. And I think probably something like that happened in this particular case.
Yeah.
So when you are so if you're doing your own tires and stuff, always remember that. And anybody that will teach you how to do that, they never tell you to heave on it. They tell you to bring it up snug, and then you bring it up tight, and then just give it a little extra, but not a huge. Don't lean on the thing. You bring it up tight to hand tightness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're bringing them up as you wheel it in. You wheel them up, and of course you have to follow the pattern. You have to go every second.
And the other thing about them is that if you're doing your own tire changes, they also advise you about 3 or 4 days later to go also recheck all your lug nuts.
Yeah. After doing it, give them another little snug if they need it. Check them all out.
Yeah.
In case they've loosened off.
Because they often do loosen up a little bit a few days afterwards. But when with the modern ways that they do them at like Canadian Tire or mechanics do them, they do them to just right, and you never need to redo them.
Well, yeah, they put the proper torque on them.
That's what I found after many, many years. I used to have a torque wrench when I was young. Don't know why I went and bought one, but I did. So I was always testing these things once it was on there. And I used to test the ones that came back from the garages. And then eventually I don't know what happened to the torque wrench, but I stopped using it. Possibly.
Well, you'll notice a lot of guys just like when they get their impact guns, they're not set on full when they run your lugs up and so on. If they sit on that lug nut and go, that's bad. You never see them do that.
Yeah,
they go, right, and then put the torque on it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anyway, so drive safe, everybody. All right. So the feds might be scrapping the F-35 deal. And one of the things that's been talked about is potential for buying Swedish Saab Gripen jets. And this
the Swedish Saab Gripen jet might be a better jet overall than the F-35.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about it is it actually is consistent with new directions that Canada's looking to trade in, and that would be a better jet. And we seem to be woefully shy on all of our military right now.
Yeah, because we let it slide so long, and that's the one thing that Trump was right about. Yeah, he's right on a few things. I hate to admit it, but that was one of the most important things he pointed out way back in his first administration. Why are we putting up all this money and you guys are not doing zero? You're doing zero. Yeah. You're doing, and everybody was appalled by the fact that he said you gotta live up to your obligations in the treaty, which you've never done. That was a wake-up call for Europe and Canada and places like that. But now we see the extended war in Ukraine, how uncontrolled Netanyahu is in the Middle East, and how the U.S. can't rein him in. So the very idea that things could go out of hand and we being unprepared is glaring us right in the face. Now, I have a feeling that go ahead.
And we also have underfunded troops, too small an army, and too few ships in our navy, and too few fighter jets, etc. You put every statistic up against other nations of a similar size, and we're woefully short.
We are, but the other European nations have lagged behind as well.
True.
So the basically, but with the F-35, I have a feeling we're going to buy the F-35. Now, the drawbacks with the F-35 is we're not going to get the very best F-35, and we're going to get one that the Americans can control if they want to, because they'll have the control systems in it. Now, but the reason why we probably buy the F-35 because it will probably be part of the trade deal we'll have with the United States. I think the real reason why they're delaying the purchase of the F-35 is to keep it on the table and proposing they might get the Gripen. I don't think they'll ever will. If they can get, they might buy the Gripen if they're not going to get anything from the U.S. out of the trade deal, but they can use that as a bargaining chip when the trade negotiations begin. I don't even think we're going to get a trade deal with the United States with Trump until the negotiations for the new trade deal come up.
Yeah.
Although quietly, Trump has reduced the tariffs on things like nickel because they need them. So quietly, they've, without going to the press, reduced some of the tariffs on essential minerals stuff that are coming from Canada.
And actually, this is quite a bargaining chip, the F-35 jets, because we thought that they had been done. That was done with last year or 18 months ago, actually, and it wasn't. So in a way,
well, we would have had them. We probably would have had one or two of them already if the conservative government was looking to procure them back just before the end of their tenure when Trudeau took over.
Yeah.
And Trudeau canceled it. And then a couple of years ago, he hurriedly said we didn't need them. We didn't need to do the war thing. And then, of course, suddenly he turns around and changes his mind real quick and starts negotiations all over again, which would have cost us a lot more money because we didn't do it when we should have done it.
Yeah.
But that notwithstanding, the idea that now the Canadian government does have this bargaining chip, you want a trade negotiation with us? Well, one of the things we could do is buy the F-35 instead of the Gripen.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it is a feint or.
I think the Gripen's a better fighter anyway, from everything I've read about it. Not that I really know either the F-35 or the Gripen. I'm a layperson when it comes to that stuff, so I don't know anything.
They are equivalent.
Yeah.
And the problem with the F-35 would always be we are then again obliged to the United States for the parts for it, for this and for that of it.
Yeah.
And we won't. And the United States can actually control them. They can tell what we're doing with them and all that other stuff. So that's a thing. But I don't think that's such an issue with Canada because we're so aligned with the States and everything. We do know that our border services and our combined defense strategy with the United States is going along swimmingly. It has done for a very long time. The cooperation is first rate. And we found that as a general was being interviewed by, I don't know if it was Congress, and this is after Trump got in. He sort of belied the idea that Canada was not doing its job. The only one complaint that the general did have about Canada was they do everything great, but they're too small. They have to increase the size of their military capacity.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Ford government says it wants to ban speed cameras across Ontario. He called the speed cams a cash grab at a news conference yesterday, and is vowing to stop municipalities from using speed cameras.
Yeah, he's going to introduce legislation to make them illegal. But he says of the 444 municipalities in Ontario, only about 30 or something municipalities use them. He doesn't like them. He thinks they're a cash grab. He really does have a bee in his bonnet for this issue. I don't know why it's so important to him. But
Well, I would
he
agree.
says it's a
I would
cash grab.
agree with him, but again, those people that say that there's a certain amount of money that municipalities get from these, and it's a good thing for the municipalities. I also understand that argument. One of the things having come from a country that has got so many, before I left there 20 years ago, we had speed cameras coming out your ass, such a horrible amount of speed cameras, and the speed cameras in part paid for the police, for the police forces.
Yeah, so the cash grab thing, I'm not even sure that's yeah, it could be a bit that way, but let me tell you, he says it doesn't slow people down. It does. I've witnessed it in every place there's been a speed camera. I've known the speed to be reduced. I saw it on Montrose Road. I myself got nailed. I seen it here on Thorlstone Road, right? There's a crossing guard station right here, right at, like, yards from my building, and people slow down there for the crossing guards and stuff like that. And as soon as they get past them, they put the foot back on the pedal when there's a school right there.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that Ford's right about this. He definitely doesn't like that. I know myself. I have a hard time accepting them because I don't like that big brother thing where somebody's watching you at all times. But that's probably an argument that's gone by the wayside because everybody with a phone can put you under surveillance. So the idea, I don't know if he's really tested it. He claims that it doesn't slow people down. I say it does. And the fact that they're slowing people down in vulnerable areas where there's a vulnerable pedestrian population, that's what I'm not so sure of. I don't like the idea of cameras on me all the time either, but is it effective or isn't it effective? Now, he seems to want to believe what he wants to believe, and he's going to change it
on
to
balance,
put signage up. But will bigger signage really do the trick? If people know that despite the sign, if there's a big sign, well, at least I'm not going to get a ticket if I blast through, you know?
Well, I think that I'm not a fan of speed bumps. I am a fan of roundabouts. I'm not really a fan of curb extensions because often curb extensions cause cars constrict cars into unnecessarily smaller gaps, and you end up with people bumping the curb, and that ends up kind of costing municipalities more in terms of maintenance. But I like the idea of roundabouts. What bugs me is I come across, and I'm the only person on the street, and suddenly the light in front of me turns red, and there's nobody about. And then, so I'm going left, and just before the light changes from green to green, from red to green, somebody coming the other way turns right, comes along and turns right, and they're in my way, kind of thing. And that's a bad thing, but I was first on that go left road, if you know what I mean, and then this person gets ahead of me and then idles along slowly.
Well, you're going to have to get a camera in your car, take a picture, and make a citizen's arrest.
Yeah, but that's just the way luck goes. That's why I prefer roundabouts, because in some of these streets, if you had some of these lights, if you had a roundabout, I'd be gone already.
Yeah. I don't know. I like roundabouts because it keeps traffic flowing, and it slows people down. It does exactly what you want to do.
Yeah,
it's just to slow down and direct people without them having do not have to come to a complete stop depending on who's coming, so I don't know. I think that's a good idea, but the four-way stops, I think you're better than a four-way stops, but a four-way stop would be good inside residential areas with straight roads.
Well, four-way stops are good inside residential areas. They're not good when it comes to a residential area where you've got a main road, like my street and Bridge Street, right? Bridge Street is clearly the main street. All you need to do is put stops on Second Avenue, Second and Bridge, right? And Second Avenue, you're not a priority road, so you don't get to go if the traffic on Bridge. Pure and simple.
Well, that's common
Every
sense.
road has every road junction. There's a priority, and the priority road always gets to go first. That's it. And you put stop signs on the non-priority roads, and they obey the stop signs, and that's it. Again,
Well, when you have in a residential area where you've got a couple of straight roads coming together, and not one is more important
then you put an always stop.
Because what happens is you got a straight strip of road, people just fly through it.
Yeah.
Even with on an all-way, like there was a guy in my old neighborhood. He'd do the same thing just about every day. He'd blow through a four-way because he was evidently late, and he'd throw his coffee cup pretty close to the corner too. So he'd be finishing his coffee in the paper coffee cup, and he'd toss it out the window as he blew through the four-way. Now he blew through the four-way because, of course, he knew that if anyone was coming the other way, they had to stop. So he never bothered stopping ever for it.
Yeah.
Which he just drove me nuts because I don't know if it was more pissed because of the coffee cup he threw out every day or almost every day, and or he just blow through it. He would just blow through it every morning on his presumably on the way to work. But anyway,
yeah.
So four-way stops.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see in the upcoming period. If you use cameras, I think you've got to be making it patently clear there's a camera there.
Yes.
Patently clear, and we should be using permanent cameras rather than movable cameras.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like if there was one on Bridge Street, it should always be on Bridge Street, and it's not there for 3 months, and then it's on Thorold Stone for 3 months. You know what I mean? Yeah. And hey, I'm not making any recommendations to the region to where to put cameras, right? Okay.
Well, anyway, to get right back to the core of the story, is Doug Ford right in what he says? He says it does not slow down the traffic. In my experience, it does. In vulnerable places, it does. Yeah. He thinks it's a big money grab. That may be part of it, but in my experience, it slows traffic down where there are children. And I'm not so sure to replace the threat of a camera with a big sign is going to do nearly as much. So I hope he gets a little bit of resistance on there, at least I want to see the proof that it doesn't work.
I want us to see in all residential areas where there's no major road, where you're going through housing zones. I would like to see 25 km/h speed limits in all of those areas. 50 km/h speed limits when you're up to something, a street like Bridge Street where it's a clear major road, but 25 if you're in a pure residential zone. I'd like to see that speed limit cut down, and that might help. But again, there are people like my brother-in-law. Not that he's ever done this in Canada, but he used to drive 100 miles an hour down a residential street. He was a nutcase.
Well, yeah, he has to be put in jail, that guy.
Yeah.
Or his license taken away from him.
Well, that was the thing. He needed his license taken away from him and for life.
Yeah. Like you can't tell these people that you're going to kill somebody, and when you do, you have to live with that forever. Yeah. And they just doesn't go in. It just doesn't go in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know. Yeah, and the thing is, there are unfortunately some people like that, right? Anyway, okay, moving on. former a bank Canada bank employee is charged with accessing Prime Minister Carney's account.
Yes. Well, now we have Bank of Canada employee. Now, you think they would vet these guys a little bit better than they do.
Yeah, you would
right?
think.
This guy, go ahead.
Yeah, you would think exactly that. I'm just echoing what you were saying. You would think they would be vetted and that you wouldn't, and security wouldn't allow him to access Carney's account without Carney's card, without Carney being there.
But that's not the worst thing this guy's done. Now, he poked into Justin Trudeau's bank account. He's gone into Mark Carney's account. These are supposed to be highly trusted employees. So this guy is a 23-year-old bank employee, and his name is Ibrahim El Hakim. And what he's done basically, the RBC Ottawa has charged him with fraud, unauthorized use of computer, identity theft, and trafficking identity information. Police said, "Now,
he was using
how is it?
Yeah, and
how is it that he got away with it? How come there isn't any kind of wall up?" Now, they've obviously given this guy a lot of proprietary privileges.
I suspect here he's an IT employee, and as an IT employee, you tend to have a higher level of security access because it says he was allegedly using RBC's IT services for criminal purposes, right? So that says to me he's an IT employee and therefore has a heightened level of security. But most IT employees realize that there's a level of trust that they have. i.e., the IT guy who fixes your computer, in the accounts department, etc. They've got to they get to know passwords and everything. They can log into your computer remotely, diagnose it remotely, fix your problem remotely, and even if they come to your desk, they can still use everything on your computer. You rely upon them to fix your system problems, right? Well, there's a certain amount where they do have to have the heightened security. They need it. But when you abuse it, that's a problem.
Yeah, so Al Hakim told them that he had been lured by a person on Telegram whom police believe is linked to organized crime. The individual paid him a total of $5,000 Canadian to access certain banking profiles and obtain lines of credit, the affidavit said. The suspect is scheduled to appear in court. Now, here's the understatement of all understatements. Mr. El Hakim is no longer working at the bank.
Yeah, duh. I think that was a given, right?
Oh, is it? Well, the Canadian government, Mr. Hakim had, problems, so we're going to keep him hired on, pay his salary. You don't know, but this is the bank, and they're a little bit no nonsense, and they're very, very embarrassed by this.
Yeah.
How could this breach happen? And for so little coin. Look, Hakim was lured away for $5,000 Canadian.
$5,000, yeah. I wouldn't even do that for $500,000. You know what I mean?
And he's been poking around. He's been poking around in Justin Trudeau's account and Carney's account, unauthorized access to it. So you got a 22-year-old guy, or 23-year-old guy. You hired him 2 years or 3 years ago in 2022, right? Obviously, you didn't vet him. Obviously, you didn't put limitations on what this guy could do. So you hired a guy that's 20 years old, and he starts snooping around, and he gets away with it for a few years. So where's the safety guards here?
Yeah.
When a bank employee can come in and start snooping around like that.
Yeah.
Like, are there no eyes on him? Are there no secondary? Every time you open up something, doesn't light up a red flag somewhere in the system?
Yeah.
right? They have
Absolutely.
to find
Yeah.
an anomaly and then search back and go reverse engineer the anomaly to find out that the guy is cheating and getting into the prime minister's bank account. A 23-year-old hack gets into the prime minister's account and he's being paid
We don't know.
$5,000.
Yeah, we don't know which, so I'm assuming it's the Prime Minister's personal bank account, but whether it's the Prime Minister's personal bank account or his prime ministerial account, that is still a problem either way.
I want to know what he does because I want my income tax back.
Yeah.
Look, Kearney, you charged me this much tax. I'm charging you tax too. Give it back.
Yeah, but it's not Mark Carney that took it. It's this robber at the RBC. Now you've got a cause to get your income tax back. Yeah.
Yeah, El Hakim, you should have showed me what you're doing and before you got caught.
All right. One thing to note from a couple of days ago: Canadian resident return trips from the US have been down 32%.
Yeah, that's a number of factors. Yeah, so basically the number one thing is the trade tariffs and how irked and annoyed people are. But the other equal factor probably is the amount of money. Our dollar is tremendously weak against the U.S. dollar, and our economy is not doing it all that well. But I know it myself. Look, let me give you a comparison. Like last year at Staples, when I was getting donations, things were going very well for the economy, basically speaking. Not great, but pretty good for most people. And I got a lot more donations last year than I'm getting this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing to note about this is that also American visits to Canada is up.
Yeah, so they're not intimidated by us, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because we didn't bring the trade war to them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The beloved leader did that down south there.
Yeah.
Him and his sycophants.
Yeah. Okay. And moving on quickly to Niagara's green energy future. So they're talking about Niagara economic development is spending money with the region and I think the region and province in order to develop the region's new green energy future.
Yeah, they have to readjust everything. You noticed that in this article, it tells you all the different EV supportive industries that have stalled or delayed due to economic uncertainty. And of course, everybody has to readjust their green timeline. And one of the solutions that Niagara hopes to explore, it's already built this hydrogen separator right there on Whirlpool Road. It's being I drive
past it every day. I drive past it every day. It's probably about 80% complete right now.
Yeah. So this is basically how, in order to have a hydrogen fueled economy, you need massive amounts of electrical power to separate oxygen from hydrogen. And if you do that, then you can thereby use the hydrogen fuel, which is the ultimate clean fuel. You can get a lot of power from hydrogen in a combustion type engine, and that will, and the exhaust is only water vapor as it recombines with oxygen in the combustion process. So it's very, very clean. The drawback is, of course, it needs enormous amounts of electrical power to do it. Most hydrogen comes from stripping the hydrogen atom out of natural gas, which is a dirty process. Although you're ended up with a clean fuel, you still do a lot of polluting when you do that.
Yeah.
But this is the best way to do it. Now, the rub here is it needs enormous amounts of electrical power to do it. We have it. We can do it. So our buses and things like that can start to use hydrogen power, as we find hydrogen buses in other places in the world. So what Joyce Morocco and others have said for the region, they've said, this is the way to start if you want to convert. You're not going to get vehicles out there, the everyday sedan out there with a hydrogen motor anytime soon. But what you can do is begin to reduce your carbon footprint by using buses and other major trucking thing with hydrogen.
But if done
Communities
correctly,
can use them. Yeah.
But if done correctly, there's no reason why my gas engine couldn't be converted to hydrogen anyway.
No, not easy thing to do.
Mm.
Not an easy thing to do at all. You could convert your combustion engine probably to natural gas, which would make it a cleaner burning fuel, and that has been done, but that's mostly been scrapped too. You can also convert it.
I've never seen.
But
I've not seen anything
to convert it to hydrogen is a whole different thing, because the exhaust is basically water, so you have to figure out what you're going to do with your engine with water vapor coming out of it rather than the other kinds of exhaust. So I'm not so sure it's an easy convert.
All right. Well, with somebody who I remember when this was first discussed a few years ago, they were talking about it being an easy conversion.
Yeah, I would hold off on that idea right now.
I'm not talking about doing it. I'm just, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm not about to do that to my, to my current car. But it's not, if it was meant to run on gas, it stays running on gas as far as I'm concerned. But I would think it's relatively easy to move over gas, from gas type engines to hydrogen type engines.
Well, the biggest problem is the fuel cell.
Yeah.
And the stabilization of the fuel. It can be stabilized and protected much easier in larger vehicles, and and stored as well. So, and I'm not so sure what the BTU is comparative from hydrogen to petroleum products. So here we have basically the Canadian projects that have been recently paused or halted due to investment uncertainty are the $15 billion plan in Alliston is on hold. Unicor is delaying a $1.5 billion cathode facility. Northvolt is postponing a $7 billion battery cell project near Montreal. But then again, on the bright, so there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to EVs, which is the trend we were supposed to go on. We were supposed to go shift towards electric vehicles. We had in Canada, we have most of all the materials to make the batteries, separate the batteries. We have the steel, aluminum, and everything else to make the car. The big problem, of course, is source of power.
It's the change in US policy that is actually delaying the expansion of the electric motor.
Well, even before that, the electric car was not selling. And it wasn't selling as much as they thought it would be.
And a lot of that, I think, in Canada was due to the lack of infrastructure. In order to sell cars, you have to be able. It's like what I need to be able to do to my landlord, to the landlord at work is saying, "Hey, are we going to get some plug-in power sockets so we can charge our cars at work?"
Well, it's more than that, because there's a lot of people that use electric cars every day, all over. Like I had a friend of mine went all over the States in an electric car. He had no problem.
They have the infrastructure.
Your route. And Tesla has responded very, very well for the amount of electric car charging stations that are available. Now, when you go up to Northern Ontario or something like that, it might be a difference. But if you are committed to the EV, then private industry will be committed to charging stations. The problem is that electric car is more expensive than a combustion one for basically the combustion car. They estimate about $10,000 more. So when you have a middle class that is straining, they're not about to go and buy a EV. I wasn't going to buy it.
When it's 20% more on price, no.
Yeah, and
the price has to come down. If I've got a vehicle A which is gas and vehicle B which is electric, and they're in the same price range, I might be considering the electric.
Yes, and here's the bitter irony here is we could have all been driving electric cars by now if we let the Chinese electric car come into our country.
There's an
Because
interesting
the Chinese electric, you can get a $12,000, $15,000 brand new Chinese electric car that is nearly as good as a Tesla.
Yeah. There's one that I've seen which is the size of a Mini. It's a Japanese one. They're basically, it's a single, almost a single seater, large. It's a large single seater which has you a capacity for a bit more than, a bit more than a single seat in terms of extra storage capacity and the like. But it's basically a larger than a smart car or about the size of a smart car or Mini, and they can do like 300 or 400 kilometers easily in it, and they use it for around town.
Well, yeah, that's one example, but I'm talking about a sedan, your typical car that everybody uses, sedan or RV,
Yeah.
and you can get them from China, and you can be suited up for one for about $15,000 Canadian, brand new, ready to go. We can't produce them for that price. That's why we put a huge tariff on them, and the Chinese, of course, are pumping them out, keeping their prices, unfairly competitive.
They can keep their prices artificially low because of the system that they operate.
Yeah, they drive, their whole economy is based on an export system, so they keep their currency low. They just keep adjusting the prices of everything to make sure that it's lower than whatever. So their whole kind of economy is based on an export economy. The rest of the world is trying to push them into a more domestic based, or at least a domestic based economy, so that they don't they don't have to be so predatory when it comes to world exports.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen anytime soon.
No,
but the fact of the matter is, that's just an irony. If we wanted electric cars in Canada, all we have to do is open the door to Chinese electric cars, and they'll be all over here very quickly.
Yeah, and that $10,000 car, that $10,000 or $15,000 car that you've talked about, is actually, it's a good runner. It will do 400. It will do 400 miles on the charge. It's not meant to be a long distance car. It's meant to be your drive around town car. So,
well, you can get you to Toronto and back, and you can just keep charging it. So
I was going to say, for me, it would be an ideal go to work car. I'd still keep my other car as the kind of weekend driver or when I'm going somewhere car.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but these Chinese cars are built to replace combustion engine cars in every aspect. So if you're going to jump into your electric car, you go to Toronto, and then you want to go north, you get another charge, you go north. In places like Southern Ontario, where there are lots of charging stations, it would be perfect. But we can't open that door. We want to clean up our air by driving electric cars, and we could do it almost overnight by letting the Chinese cars in, but we don't do that because it will kill our economy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like catch-22, basically.
It is.
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah. All right, we got to get going. We got to end.
All right. Well, I'm just going to bring up Gaza again. All of the UN has come down heavy on the United States and Israel for doing what it's doing. There is an armada of supply ships going to Gaza now as we speak, and they're guarded by the Spanish and Italian warships. The Israelis have already tried to buzz them with drones and drop bombs in and around them, not on them. Tried to scare them off, but they're going right for Gaza, and we'll see what happens then.
And the interesting thing is about these are small ships from what I've seen. They're mainly, small supply ships, tug type size, fishing ships, that type of thing, smaller vessels that are each prepared to take, and they're going to take a run into Gaza to try and supply Gaza.
Yeah. Now, this is a huge embarrassment and has angered Netanyahu crazy. He is pushing and pushing and pushing. He cannot let this war stop. The minute this war stops, he's out of office. His idea of a greater Israel comes to a halt. Even Trump said that he will not let Israel annex the West Bank. Israel has said it will annex the West Bank, and the United States says it will not allow that to happen. But then again, Trump changes his mind every 10 seconds, so we don't know if he'll hold on to that idea. But
yeah, okay, and good morning, Karen. All right.
Hey, Karen, how you doing? Nice to see you there again.
Yeah.
Hey, Fred, you interviewed Vivian Little, I hear, on your show. Vivian's a good pal of mine for sure. So right. I hope that went well.
All right. See you, everybody, and have a great weekend.
All right.
Bye.
Without further ado,